Something has shifted today, and it was never meant to go unnoticed. There's a quiet change in the atmosphere around you, not chaotic, not dramatic, but heavy, still deliberate. Like reality itself just took a deep breath and is now holding it. And if something inside you reacted the moment you heard this, that wasn't random, that was recognition. Before we go further, don't just watch this passively. Type "I'm ready" in the comments, not as a habit, but as a decision. Because what's opening right now is not just information, it's activation. It hasn't fully arrived yet, not in the physical world, but energetically, it's already here. You can feel it pressing at the edge of expression, like something is about to be said, something that can no longer stay contained. This is the energy of a confession, something that has been held back, controlled, delayed, and carried for longer than it should have been. It may come from someone outside of you, someone who has been holding words they didn't know how to speak. Or it may rise from within you, from a place you have avoided or were not ready to access until now. But no matter where it comes from, one thing is certain. It cannot remain hidden any longer, because under the influence of Mercury entering Taurus, communication is no longer light or temporary. It becomes real, grounded, solid. And when truth reaches that level, it doesn't ask for permission to be expressed. It demands it. Someone has been holding something in, gripping it tightly, waiting for the right moment, trying to maintain control. But that moment has arrived. The portal is open. And the energy is no longer waiting. It is building steadily, quietly, powerfully, until the truth can no longer remain contained and finally finds its voice. And if you're honest with yourself, you already felt this coming. Long before this moment, long before these words, there was a part of you that sensed something was shifting. Not in your thoughts, but in your body, in your awareness. In those quiet moments when your mind wasn't distracted, there was a subtle knowing. A feeling that something was approaching, something that would bring clarity, even if that clarity felt intense or uncomfortable. That wasn't confusion. That was preparation. Your intuition has been guiding you here, piece by piece, through things that didn't fully make sense at the time. Through silence, through energy, through moments where what was felt was stronger than what was said. And now that inner voice is becoming louder, clearer, more impossible to ignore. This is what awareness expanding feels like. It's not always calm. It's not always gentle. Sometimes it feels intense, confronting, deeply real. But it is always aligned with truth. You are not imagining this. You are remembering how to listen. That pressure you feel right now, that weight in your chest, that pull in your thoughts that keeps bringing you back to the same thing, that is not random. That is everything that has not yet been expressed. Every word you didn't say, every feeling you pushed aside, every truth that stayed just below the surface. It didn't disappear. It stayed. It gathered. And now it is asking to be released. Because truth is not just something you think. It is something you carry. And when it has been held for too long, it begins to move, slowly at first, then more insistently, until it finds a way to be expressed. This is the portal activating within you. There is always a moment like this, right before everything changes, where the energy feels suspended, like reality itself is holding still, waiting for something to tip the balance. You are standing in that moment now. On the surface, it may feel like nothing is happening, like things are paused, unresolved, unclear. But beneath that stillness, something is aligning with precise and intentional movement. This is where paths begin to separate. One path stays in silence, in avoidance, in the comfort of not knowing. The other moves toward truth, clarity, and a shift that cannot be undone. And the decision between those paths is already beginning to happen. T is being decided now, not through force, not through control, but through your vibration, through what you're willing to face, through what you are no longer willing to ignore. This moment is not about chasing an outcome. It is about recognizing where you stand as the shift approaches. Because what makes this moment so powerful is not that it brings something new into your life. It reveals what has already been there all along. The portal that has opened is not here to create truth. It is here to uncover it. Which means, whatever begins to surface now, whatever enters your awareness, whatever is spoken or finally understood, was never truly hidden. It was simply waiting for you to be ready to see it clearly. There is a difference between something being absent and something being unseen. And right now, you are moving between those two states. As the layers begin to fall away, as your perception sharpens, as clarity settles in, you may start recognizing things that were always there, but never fully acknowledged. And once you see it, once you feel it as deeply as you understand it, it changes you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. A quiet shift that alters how you see, how you feel, and how you move forward from here. There comes a point in every cycle where silence can no longer hold, where the effort it takes to keep something unspoken becomes heavier than finally saying it. You are entering that point now. What once felt easy to ignore, to delay, to suppress, is beginning to push forward. Not explosively, but steadily, unavoidably. You may notice it in subtle ways. Conversations changing tone, pauses lasting longer than they should, a tension in the air that no one is naming. That is not random discomfort. That is truth trying to emerge. And the more it is resisted, the stronger it becomes. Because this isn't about creating conflict, it's about dissolving illusion. And illusion can only survive in silence. For so long, under the influence of Mercury entering Taurus, truth doesn't stay abstract. It doesn't hover as a maybe. It descends. It anchors. It becomes real. Something you don't just think about, but something you feel in your body. Something that reshapes how you stand in your own reality. This is the deeper energy of Taurus, not just stabilizing communication, but crystallizing it, turning it into something that lasts. Words now carry weight. Consequence. Intention. What is spoken now stays, and what is realized now becomes part of who you are. You may start to feel this shift inside your mind, where scattered thoughts begin to organize into clarity, where emotional chaos settles into something steady. Grounded. You're no longer circling confusion, you're moving toward understanding. And this energy doesn't rush you, it slows you down, just enough to feel what is real, to let it land, to let it integrate instead of passing through you. And in that slowing down, something powerful happens. You begin to trust what you know. The constant doubt, the back and forth, it starts to quiet. Not because everything is explained externally, but because something inside you has settled into certainty. This isn't blind belief. This is embodied knowing. The kind of clarity that doesn't need validation, because it's already anchored within you. And as this grounding deepens, it doesn't stay internal. It begins to shape your external world. Your decisions shift. Your actions change. And the way you move forward from this point will no longer be the same. There comes a moment, and you may already feel yourself standing inside it right now, where something subtle yet undeniable begins to shift in the way you move through your own life, not in a dramatic or explosive way, but in a quiet recalibration that changes everything beneath the surface, because suddenly the choices that once felt heavy with doubt no longer carry the same weight, and the boundaries you used to hesitate to draw begin to form almost naturally, as if some deeper part of you has finally decided it is done negotiating with what no longer aligns. And what is most striking is not that you are forcing this change, but that you are no longer questioning it. There is less second-guessing, less reaching outward for reassurance, less of that familiar need to check if you are allowed to choose yourself, and in its place something far more grounded begins to emerge. A calm certainty that does not need to prove itself. A confidence that is not loud or performative, but anchored so deeply within you that it reshapes how you respond to everything around you. And this is where the real transformation begins, because what was once an idea, what was once something you understood intellectually now, becomes something you act from without hesitation. Truth stops being a distant realization and becomes the very ground beneath your feet, the structure that holds your next steps, the framework that supports your expansion. And once it settles into you at this level, it cannot be reversed. It no longer drifts in and out of awareness. It becomes embedded in how you see, how you choose, how you move forward. And even when everything around you begins to change, that internal alignment remains steady, guiding you in ways that feel almost instinctive. And as this internal anchoring deepens, something else begins to rise alongside it. Something more intense, more confronting. Your ability to see yourself without distortion sharpens in a way that is impossible to ignore. And this is not the kind of reflection you can easily soften or reinterpret to stay comfortable. This is a level of honesty that cuts through every illusion you once relied on, revealing not only who you have been, but who you are right now in this exact moment, without the filters, without the stories that made things easier to accept. And what makes this experience even more powerful is that it does not stay contained within your inner world. It begins to show up through the people you encounter, the situations you find yourself in, the conversations that seem to carry more weight than usual, as if life itself has become a mirror, reflecting you back to you from every angle. And you may start to notice patterns resurfacing, reactions that feel familiar, emotional responses that you have experienced before. But this time something is different. This time you can actually see them as they happen. You can recognize the cycles in real time. And that recognition changes everything, because it removes the illusion that these patterns are random or external, and instead shows you the deeper connection between your inner world and your outer reality. And this mirror is not here to judge you. It is not exposing you to diminish you. It is revealing you so that you can finally understand yourself without distortion. And in that understanding, you may begin to notice parts of yourself that you have overlooked or avoided, fears that have quietly shaped your decisions, desires that you have pushed aside because they felt inconvenient or too vulnerable to claim, behaviors that have become automatic simply because they were never questioned. And there is a rawness to seeing yourself this clearly, a vulnerability that can feel almost disorienting because you are no longer protected by the narratives you once used to make sense of everything. But within that vulnerability, there is an extraordinary kind of power, because the moment something becomes visible, it also becomes workable. The moment you can see it, you can begin to understand it. And the moment you understand it, you gain the ability to change it. And this process does not stop at your internal awareness. It extends into your relationships, into the way others respond to you, into the energy that moves between you and the people around you. You may notice that certain interactions feel more intense, more revealing, as if others are reflecting back aspects of you that resonate on a deeper level, even when it is uncomfortable to acknowledge. And this is not coincidence. This is alignment. This is the universe, creating multiple points of reflection so that you can observe the same truth from different perspectives. And as all of this unfolds, you are not being asked to avoid what you see. You are being asked to decide how you will respond to it, whether you continue repeating the same emotional patterns or begin to shift them, whether you stay within the familiar or choose something that reflects your new level of awareness. And this is where your power truly begins, because the mirror does not confine you to what it reveals. It frees you by showing you that you are not fixed, that you are not bound to the patterns you have carried, that you have the ability to step out of unconscious repetition and into deliberate creation. And even though this level of awareness can feel intense, even overwhelming at times, it is also the doorway to a deeper version of yourself, one that is no longer shaped by past conditioning, but by present clarity. And the more you allow yourself to see without turning away, the more you begin to realize that this reflection is not here to define you. It is here to remind you that you are constantly evolving. That the moment you truly see yourself is the moment everything begins to change. And now the energy that has been building quietly beneath the surface is no longer willing to stay hidden. It is rising. It is expanding. And it is preparing to move you into the next phase, whether you feel ready or not. There is a shift happening now that does not ask for your permission. It simply arrives, and what once lived at the edges of your awareness, vague, distant, easy to question or dismiss, is suddenly stepping forward into the center of your experience with a clarity that refuses to be ignored. And you can feel it, even if nothing has been spoken, yet a subtle pressure building beneath the surface. A quiet intensity in the atmosphere that makes everything feel like it is leaning toward a moment that cannot be postponed any longer. This is the height of confession energy, and it does not rush in. Chaotically it gathers. It concentrates. It builds itself through the smallest details, through shifts so subtle that only someone truly present would notice them. The way a conversation pauses just a second too long. The way someone looks at you and then looks away, as if holding something back. The way words hover at the edge of expression and then retreat at the last possible moment. And if you are paying attention, you realize none of this is random. It is all part of a larger movement, because when truth reaches a certain level of intensity, it begins to search for a way out. It starts pressing against the boundaries that once contained it, and even before anything is said directly, you can feel it trying to emerge, and that is where the emotional weight comes in, because confession is never just about information. It is about exposure. It is about revealing something that has been guarded, something that carries meaning, something that has required protection, and whether this truth comes from another person or rises from within you, it demands a kind of openness that can feel both liberating and deeply unsettling at the same time, because in that moment, control begins to loosen. The need to maintain a certain version of yourself or a certain narrative starts to dissolve, and authenticity begins to take its place, whether you feel ready for it or not. And that is why this energy feels so powerful. Because it is not only about the words that will eventually be spoken, it is about the emotional reality that exists behind those words, the truth that has been building quietly until it reaches a point where it can no longer remain hidden. And as this energy intensifies, something shifts inside you, or inside the other person involved. The fear that once kept everything contained starts to lose its grip. The resistance weakens, and what replaces it is a sense of inevitability, a knowing that this truth is going to surface no matter what. And at that point, it is no longer a question of whether something will be revealed. It becomes a matter of when and when that moment finally arrives. It does not pass without consequence. Because the act of speaking truth changes everything. It alters the emotional landscape. It reshapes. Understanding it forces a new level of awareness that cannot be undone. And what makes this so significant is that once something is brought into the open, it does not return to the shadows in the same way. It becomes part of your reality, part of how you see, how you relate, how you move forward. And this is why this moment is not just a release. It is a turning point. Because what is revealed here becomes a foundation, something that integrates into your path, whether it feels comfortable or not. And even though this process can feel intense, even overwhelming, It carries a profound clarity within it, because in the moment of confession, illusion does not survive it, dissolves completely, leaving only what is real. And that reality may challenge you. It may shift how you see someone, how you see yourself, how you understand a situation that once felt uncertain. But within that shift, there is also freedom. Because illusions do not collapse all at once, they weaken. They lose their structure piece by piece, and then suddenly, they cannot hold themselves together anymore in the presence of truth. And that is what is unfolding now. The narratives that were built on avoidance, on partial understanding, on things left unsaid, are beginning to break down, and you may feel this as a series of realizations that change everything. Moments where things that once confused you suddenly make sense, where something that once felt convincing no longer carries the same power. And it is important to understand that this is not something being taken away from you. This is something being cleared. It is the removal of what was never fully aligned, so that something real can finally take its place. And yes, this process can feel disorienting, because it asks you to let go of what felt familiar, even if that familiarity was built on illusion. But at the same time, it is deeply freeing, because it creates space for truth to exist without distortion, for clarity to guide you without interference. And as that clarity settles in, you reach a point where your path forward is no longer undefined. It becomes shaped by the choices you make in response to what you now know. And this is where everything becomes real, because you are no longer standing in a neutral space. You are standing at a point of divergence where one direction keeps you connected to what is known, even if it no longer aligns with who you are becoming, and the other leads you into change, into authenticity, into a reality that reflects your truth more accurately. And choosing that path is not always easy, because it often requires releasing expectations, patterns, or connections that once felt secure. But it is a powerful decision, because it determines not only what your next experience will be, but who you are in the process of becoming. And whether you realize it fully yet or not, this is the moment where everything begins to separate, where timelines shift, and where your response to truth defines the direction your life is about to take. There is a moment that arrives quietly, but changes everything, and you may already feel yourself standing inside it, where instead of reacting automatically to what unfolds around you, you begin to respond with a level of intention that feels unfamiliar at first but deeply right, as if something within you has finally stepped into awareness and taken the lead. And what used to feel confusing now begins to organize itself into clarity. What once made you hesitate now points you in a clear direction, and in that shift, something powerful takes place. Because this is where transformation stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you actively embody. This is where your power returns to you, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a grounded, steady presence that you can feel in your body, in your decisions, in the way you carry yourself through even the most uncertain moments. And you may start to notice that your energy feels different, more stable, more aligned, as if you are no longer scattered across multiple versions of yourself, but fully rooted in one truth that holds you in place. And what is remarkable is that this change does not require explanation. You do not need to prove it or announce it, because it is something that others can sense without words. Your presence begins to communicate what your voice no longer needs to justify. And with that shift, your interactions begin to transform. Certain dynamics that once felt natural may now feel distant connections, that once held meaning may no longer resonate in the same way. And it is important to understand that this is not something being taken from you. It is a recalibration, a realignment that reflects the level of awareness you have stepped into, because you are no longer operating from who you used to be, and as a result, your environment begins to reorganize itself around that change. And this new energetic state is not temporary. It is the result of the truth you have accepted and integrated, and it becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. And as you settle deeper into this state, something almost magnetic begins to emerge. A quiet pull that draws the right experiences, the right people, the right opportunities toward you without effort. And this is where many people misunderstand what is happening, because it is not about chasing or forcing anything into your life. It is about allowing what already resonates with your truth to find its way to you. Your energy becomes a signal, and because that signal is now rooted in clarity instead of uncertainty, what responds to it carries a different quality. It feels more stable, more genuine, more aligned with where you are going rather than where you have been. And this is the shift from effort into flow, from trying to make things happen into becoming someone who naturally attracts what is meant to align. And it all begins the moment you stop turning away from what is real and start standing fully within it. And yet, even as this new energy begins to move into your life, there is one final phase that completes this entire cycle, and it is the release of what no longer belongs in your reality. And this release does not always arrive in obvious or dramatic ways. Often, it is subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, like a quiet detachment from thoughts that once consumed you, patterns that once repeated without question, connections that once felt essential but now feel distant, and you may find yourself wondering why something that used to matter so much suddenly feels lighter, less significant, as if its hold on you has dissolved without effort. And that is because alignment does not require force to remove what no longer fits it. Naturally causes anything out of resonance to fall away, and while there may be moments where this feels like loss, what is actually happening is liberation space is being created. Energy is being restored, and you are being freed from carrying what was never meant to remain with you. And this is not something you need to push or control. It is a direct reflection of who you have become. And as clarity settles, truth integrates and release, completes itself. You reach a point where your path begins to activate in a way that feels entirely different from before. Not because everything around you suddenly changes, but because you are now moving from a place of alignment that guides your actions with precision. Your decisions feel clearer, your direction feels more intentional, and you begin to understand that your path is not something fixed or predetermined. It is something that unfolds through the awareness you hold and the choices you make in each moment. And the more aligned you remain with your truth, the more clearly that path reveals itself to you. And the more you trust that clarity, the more your external reality begins to mirror it. And this is where everything shifts. Because you are no longer observing your life from a distance, you are participating in it, consciously shaping it through your awareness instead of reacting to it unconsciously. And as all of this comes together, you arrive at a realization that cannot be undone, that everything you have experienced, the tension, the awareness, the moments of truth, the internal shifts, have all led you to this point where returning to who you once were is no longer possible, not because anything has been taken from you, but because something within you has been revealed so clearly that you cannot ignore it again. And this is where destiny stops feeling like an abstract idea and begins to feel like something real, something present, something that moves through your awareness and your choices in each moment, and the path ahead no longer feels like something you need to search for. It becomes visible as you continue to walk in alignment with what you now understand. And even though there may still be uncertainty in what lies ahead, that uncertainty no longer controls you. Because you are no longer guided by confusion, you are guided by truth. And this is the moment where everything changes, where you step forward, not as the version of yourself that once questioned everything, but as the version of yourself that knows, that trusts, and that is ready to move into what comes next.